Boom, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We have another exciting guest for you today. As we're jumping around, always trying to learn as much as possible, something that came across our desk this weekend, Beyond.link. We have Jonathan Manzi, the CEO and co-founder. Jonathan, how are you doing today?
Hey man, I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, great. It's good to have you on the show today. So, over the last few years, my interest in venture capital has started to grow. Like, even the very first days when I wrote at venture capital, I really had no idea what early seed stage or Series A investments were. And as this space has started to grow, there's a lot of changes that have come to the table. And one of the things I think that people generally have not seen a lot of yet is the ability to monetize both your data and more growingly the devices that you may have on hand. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how we got to today.
Right on. So I'm Jonathan. I am a native of Massachusetts. I grew up in Massachusetts. I went out to college in California, kind of established myself there as a tech guy. I really had a passion for technology ever since I was really young. And I started a couple of startups prior to Beyond Protocol. Beyond Protocol came out of, in some ways, the last startup I was part of. A lot of the guys who were involved in that saw this vision for hardware and software coming together, IOT. We were a hardware startup, kind of part of this pact of entrepreneurs that are interested in hardware. We're kind of a rare breed. And we're really passionate about where software and hardware is going, where devices are going, how machines in the future will transact with other machines. There's a lot of people saying there will be more payments between machines than there will actually be payments between humans. So if you kind of think about where we're headed with IoT devices, 5G and beyond, quantum computing, you kind of are faced with this issue of how are we going to ethically, there's a lot of fear of like a dystopian future with AI, kind of an amoralistic view of how technology scales up. How are we able to provide some ethics to that and think through some of these hard questions and celebrate humanity in that process? So that's kind of our way of looking at things. But background on me is I'm just super passionate about the convergence of hardware and software, but moreover, the convergence of things like technology and policy and economics. And I think Beyond Protocol is situated really nicely to provide a perspective on those matters.
So, generally we try to focus on most things finance, and when this one ran across our table, one of the reasons why it fell in that little wheelhouse is because, I've always been interested in how the average person should be able to monetize their day-to-day usage of things like the internet in general. Can you tell us a bit about what this might look like as we start to incorporate the payments between devices and what kind of use cases we could see?
Yeah, it's super fascinating. So from a standpoint of people and empowering people to create things, kind of the creators and the hackers of the world, and even just us as device owners, people who might not even code or be part of any product development. The thing with Beyond Protocol is it's basically saying, look, you've got the Apple iPhone that came out, approximately a decade ago. And from there was a whole movement of folks developing applications on top of it. And that was basically a touch screen, a camera and connectivity to the internet. And from there, you got new apps that created new industries that changed the way we do things. You have kind of groceries brought to your door and you getting into a Uber or a Lyft or whatever it might be and headed somewhere. And so these new revolutionary use cases. Now, if you look at Beyond Protocol and its vision for the future, what you have is the ability to develop applications and it's not a centralized party developing applications like Microsoft making, MS Word for its product suite. It's just like the App Store. It's developers from all over the world coming together to develop things, not on top of just an iPhone or a smartphone, but literally every single connected device. So everything from, a Nest thermostat to a drone, to weather towers. And that's an example that we have on our overview on our website and in a few videos. It's this idea of, hey, look, you can have your Nest smoke alarm pay a drone to come put out the fire, and that drone can make micropayments to weather towers on the way to get the best route. And it's kind of this futuristic use case that we kind of, can envision and think about. And it shows how there are use cases that we can't even think about that will likely come up. And that touches upon kind of everyday folks who just have these devices. The cool thing is you can start taking your devices that usually you would have to close off, because when they're anyway open right now, they're susceptible for intruders and bad actors to come in. But with Beyond Protocol, you are able to leverage distributed ledger technology and hardware signatures to make those devices probabilistically impossible to hack. So now you can kind of open up all your devices as a consumer, and you can opt into participating in these decentralized applications and monetize your participation. And not only monetize your participation, but be part of a new movement. There's a lot of great things that developers have in mind to make, that these creators have in mind to make, and the participation in some of those things that we would choose to opt into not only will make us money, but will enable new beautiful creations that can really change the way things are going and the way things can be.
When I was, I've been pondering the world of blockchain for quite some time now, and some of the first ideas that came up are self-driving cars or deliverables of some kind. I've kind of see this vision of Tesla where you don't even necessarily need to own a car. You can have micro portions of the car, how the car parts are talking to one another. What, you talked about drones putting out fire. Now, I definitely know my drone could not put out a fire. It is in no way equipped to do so. We've seen very specialized equipment for things like planting trees. How would one go about connecting some of these larger partnerships within the protocol to, again, because a lot of the times you're going to deal with enterprise level conversations of how do we close this business conversation with another business conversation, like the delivery of goods or the rental of the car that needs to take place, and these driverless vehicles. A lot of it looks like it's going to end up being automated to make what was once, let's say, a depreciative asset become an appreciative asset. Your cell phone might fit in that as well, like whether your cell phone's giving temperature data or something like this. What type of obstacles do you think you guys will have to overcome in the enterprise level to make these successful connections?
What's interesting about decentralization and kind of these things that come up from time to time, these things that we call movements that take form, and they're unpredicted, and we never thought that they would come along, and then when they do, we're kind of thinking, hey, this probably won't get so much traction, it's a fad, and then all of a sudden it starts gaining traction and becoming a significant part of our everyday life. The cool thing about these is that if there are obstacles imposed by, and there usually are, the guard, if you will, or the entrenched folks in business who have vested interests in certain ways of thinking, they usually pretty quickly have their hand forced to move forward where the winds of evolution blow. And so the obstacles that we might face would be for some of the larger guys who aren't focused on innovation and are kind of in entrenched architecture and systems and ways of thinking, to say, hey, maybe this does provide for a better future. maybe this vision is really great and it does help solve a whole host of issues, or at least address them, things like ethics in technology and the pace at which we can create really beautiful things. If they do throw up kind of the mentality of let's pump the brakes on that, the cool thing about movements is that it can very quickly circumvent that just by how nature flows. And the best example I can give is, or a relevant example I can give is DARPA and TCP/IP, which face kind of similar skepticism up front, hesitance from enterprise adoption because certain enterprise wanted to own it, and then kind of it showed that with its own essence, its own nature, it was superior and more or less a movement. It garnered things that people would say, we don't care about, any of these vested interests. This is just going to move. And I would say, to answer your question very directly, there likely will be some enterprises that look at things like what we're building and other solutions in the decentralized space and make it so adoption might look difficult. But there are plenty that do have an eye towards innovation, and that there's a way when an idea has kind of come along, it will move, and we're finding that right now with some of the biggest folks that you can think of, as well as some of the startups in the ecosystem. So I think it is. I think it is something that organically can reach significance based on the merit of the idea.
So, one of the things that we always find the most interesting are some of the teams and some of the background you guys have done. Can you tell us a little bit more about the team and other things that you guys have done for work in this area that gives you the strength to overcome those obstacles as well?
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of hit on this before. We come from a kind of lineage of hardware and software entrepreneurs, which are kind of like crazies and outcasts in some sense, particularly over the past 10 years. A little bit different than your traditional Web 2.0 type of entrepreneur, different way in which you need to seek funding and build products and provide proof of success. And the group is a tight-knit group that evolved from a startup that I started as I dropped out of school that was trying to do one of the most ambitious things I think that you can do as a hardware company, and that is to make printing sexy and relevant and celebrate kind of what printing can provide for us right now, but also into the future. And the group of folks that were very interested in that problem included former executives at HP, but also the biggest IoT companies, and also Hollywood executives, and just a great group of creators and hackers and innovators. And this group got together when we recognized the power that Beyond Protocol could provide for an rapidly emerging IoT space. And from kind of this core group, we've been so blessed and fortunate to add some amazing additional players, people like Brian Ford, who is formerly the co-founder of the MIT Digital Currency Initiative and the Media Lab over at MIT, and a senior advisor to Obama on technology, to right now the current head of blockchain at Amazon, to executives in Hollywood, studio executives in Hollywood. And it's this kind of group of enterprise tech guys, political strategists, tech guys, Hollywood guys who are really good at messaging something out to the mainstream and captivating the mainstream, but also engineers. We have a core team of Stanford University engineers that are affiliated with the blockchain initiative there. this kind of group of folks that are very passionate about the mission and vision of Beyond in their certain lanes makes us, I think, equipped to do something that is provide something that is needed in this very interdisciplinary. As I mentioned before, we kind of view it through the lens of technology, policy, and economics world that we're finding ourselves trying to provide evolved solutions for.
Yeah, fantastic. There's always been a big gap, or at least not always, but in the last while, there's been a big gap in between the product and policy and the average individual, where they're often left out of any type of conversation of what's done with their data, etc. So whereabouts are you guys in the working product to date? You have a functional beta up and running, correct?
Yeah, we've released a test net. We've developed some of our own in-house apps on top of that and showcase those. One of them is super innovative. It's a wireless electricity transfer among e-vehicles. And we have use case partners that we're in process of developing things around that area with, but other areas. And all of the use case partnership work, or some of it, will be released in kind of an unveil when we are able to kind of point to the code and point to the use cases and say, like, here's some of the really forward-thinking things that we have done in this space, some things that we feel like we made some meaningful contributions to the space at that time. We're going to publish that and showcase that and look to collaborate with others around those things. But to this point, yes, testnet, alpha, beta stage, and some in-house apps and assisting use case partners, the initial use case partners build to their specific use cases with the protocol.
So do you feel that the first, a lot of the interesting part around the conversations of adoption is people think that generally, you need to focus on the retail investor or understanding, the retail's input, and the DeFi sector, a lot of the stuff is very complicated still to kind of grasp your heads around. Are you guys focusing more on the enterprise level adoption first, or are you working on applications that are user friendly primarily?
So we tend to try to skate to the puck of value. Where can we create value for the space? And definitely getting the plumbing hooked up for IoT value transfer among a base of extreme security is extremely valuable, and that's the basis of the work we are doing. So that's basically the enterprise partners doing our job, building the blockchain or the distributed ledger technology to a point where anyone who has an IoT device can easily integrate with it. Everyone from the big enterprise guys, which are very important for mass adoption, down to the startup guys, which are also extremely important. And when it is, helpful for us to point to something that we were able to in-house build, like the wireless charging app, to show the possibilities or to show just that the thing works, we definitely will do that. I would say generally the plan, how we see kind of skating to that hockey puck of value, is making sure that the technology interfaces very efficiently with the devices that are most likely to be created and the chips that they're created with. So there's probably a group of chips that in Q1 or Q2, as an outside party, you could say, all right, my device has this chip. Beyond Protocol has released their documentation on how to integrate in with this, providing support to that sort of mindset, and that's that roadmap. That's definitely something that we've highlighted for the short to midterm.
So as a like kind of a base layer for the protocol, where are you guys operating on an already existing blockchain, or you've created your own?
Yeah, so it's it involves the architecture of the protocol involves a core consensus mechanism with validating nodes, proof of stake, and then side chains that are specific to the use case. So the way, you know, autonomous vehicles will consent to a car getting priority in a grid of traffic to kind of get to the airport quicker than the others is different than a resource constrained edge device that you know, is just providing a one direction sensory input. So the way the chain looks is that it is built on Cosmos Tendermint for a portion of the core validating consensus, and then the sidechain use case specific functionality has a whole host of different approaches based on kind of the use case and which technology we're integrating in.
So is there a level of agnostic behavior to the potential for changing through blockchains, or is it your focus specifically on running on the Cosmos chain? You know, just as an example, I'm a big fan of Avalanche because of their ability to subnet layers and have different conversations on those subnets of the blockchain. Is it technology that's able to migrate, or is it focused specifically on working with the Cosmos team into the considerable future?
It's 100% nimble. So it follows the vision, which is to be secure and able to facilitate the bridging of IoT coordination and communication. So the best way we're able to do that, that's how we've built. So it's very kind of interchangeable at the core level and also the use case level.
And for the nodes and the validators, are people having to use the Beyond protocol for that, or are they using the core base layer to run the nodes and validators at this moment?
So for validators, the core is how they would approach it as they kind of get onboarded with us. The sidechain stuff, depending on the specific way in which the sidechain forms the consensus, the way in which they would validate it, to the extent that they would participate in validation, kind of comes up for discussion and implementation.
So let's drop into the future then. What's the roadmap for the next 3 to 4 quarters look like? Where do you guys hope to get over the next year in progress, and what type of product you think we can expect to see over the next 4 quarters?
So conservatively, we would like to say that through the end of 4 quarters, you would be able to, as a IoT practitioner, so whether it's a PM product manager in a mid to large tech company, or an entrepreneur or developer, you could knock on our doors, express your interest, and get documentation on how to get going. A more kind of hopeful for quicker scaling is, don't have to knock on our doors. It's publicly available. There's enough kind of stewardship in our community to just let you go. And that's kind of our, as a decentralized open source platform, that's where we hope to be. We do want to make sure that when this stuff is out, that it's world class and scalable and things like this. So we do want to spend time making sure that we're checking the right boxes off. But I definitely say you're going to start seeing the proliferation of use cases leveraging Beyond Protocol. The cool thing about it is I think we're at this stage of consciousness or awareness of the power of blockchain in enterprise and in startups, particularly with deep tech applications like Beyond Protocol, security, us being hardware security and value transfer among IoT. That you'll see that people will start going. Whereas with some of these deep tech applications of blockchain, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, they wouldn't necessarily have the conviction. They would have the interest, but they wouldn't have the conviction or the ability to allocate resources to get going. But we, based on our kind of vantage point, it seems like people are ready to kind of get going right now, and that's very exciting for us. So in 4 quarters, you might see some things that we can't even predict yet, but because there is such a interest and kind of like let's build something mentality now, which wasn't there before, you might see some things that are big and bold that might come out as well.
So Jonathan, where can everyone learn more about the Beyond Protocol, and how do we stay in touch with your guys' updates? I know you're in the kind of private funding round. Are you aiming at having a public round? What's the resource allocations look like effectively?
Yeah, so it's kind of been a really cool story for us around that, and we're trying to partner and work with anyone who's interested in partnering with us that shares our kind of ambitious kind of mission and vision. And so just a little backstory of kind of what happened and then how we're moving forward. We always, in a Telegram room that about a month ago had roughly 1,000 people in it, we had kind of an email address to write us to express interest in collaborating, and from time to time we would allow some of the people who were expressing interest, we would allow them into the private pre-sale. And we've been doing that for about 2 to 3 years and kind of being selective with who we let in so we could best empower them. And what had happened was we were fortunate to have some folks identify us. We've been in stealth mode and start expressing a want to collaborate with us through that email address. And so we had to very quickly exchange that email address to a form. And then the room that had 1,000 kind of went to 17, 18, 19,000. And that form had thousands of requests on it. So our private pre-sale that has always been in the background is still very much there, but now we firmly want to get back and respond to everyone who has reached out to us. So we're increasing our team to be able to react and engage with those folks, and we're allowing people in that can help partner with us at this stage, and we can all effectively build things in. And then we do have planned a public pre-sale for those who we weren't able to partner with at this stage in Q3, and also a token generation event in Q3. So that's kind of the roadmap for us from just a project participation markets standpoint. From a technological standpoint, around Q3 and into Q2 of next year, you'll see the unveiling of the use cases and the documentation. And maybe at this time next year, you'll see, as we had mentioned, kind of a knock on our door to be allowed into an ecosystem, or don't even have to knock, it's just there for you. And that's from kind of the tech side.
So just as a heads up, because my lawyer would always have me remiss not to say this, none of anything we talk about here is financial advice. venture capital is obviously a risky game. The upside can be asymmetric, and this is why we're always trying to have conversations around venture capital, early stage investments, trying to look for projects that are interesting and bold enough to try to change the future of the world. Jonathan, I think it's a really interesting topic, and I'm, a lot of the things that came to mind is like how, here's kind of a random kind of far left field question. How does this, are we expecting to see integrations with like people's fridges and ordering food from Amazon? Like what type of other integrations do you think that you have on the table that are interesting for the average individual as well?
It's so how I like to kind of answer this question is with a question, and it's like, what would you like to see in your house, in your car, in your day-to-day life in 3 to 5 years? How would you like to see that come about and be organized and set up? And how does that make your life better, so the things that you're trying to achieve are more easily achieved? How can we leverage technology to serve important good missions that we all have as humans in this world? That's a worldview type of thing, but that's kind of the mission of us and what we're trying to do. So I would say anything you can imagine. I bet there's someone also who's a developer or a coder who's probably in line with that, and we hope to empower them to build those things. But yeah, of course, like refrigerators ordering, there's so many things that I can think of in my house. Refrigerators ordering food, to the cars that are picking me up to bring me somewhere, to know that I'm hungry, for example, and there potentially even being food on the way with a drone. I mean, that's kind of wacky, but there's just, I think if we provide the platform, there's just unlimited possibility.
Okay, well, great. For the rest of the Bear family, all the Beyond Protocol links will be down below, their social media as well. I think we're probably still quite early in a lot of this in adoption in general, just the volatility, people's focus on price over value acquisition. It's crazy, but it moves very quickly. One of my favorite examples was when judging by judging by you, I'm assuming we're probably pretty similar in age. And I used to think a ham radio was like super cool shit. But now I can buy a drone that flies out with thermal imaging. It's like out for 10 kilometers with 4K resolution. Just the insanity from a 50-foot tall tower to be able to talk to people a few hundred kilometers away to such a high level of technology's integration into the day-to-day life that was almost not at all visible the 10 or 20 years ago. And I think often what we do is we misunderstand that, yes, a lot of this stuff is not ready today, but over the course of the next 10 or 20 years, it comes very, very fast. And what we're trying to do is be ahead of the curve before it gets here, basically.
I agree, brother. I think there's an idea that always has been in technology and in hardware of an exponential curve as it relates to microprocessors and chips, and we've heard that as expressed as Moore's law, for example. But I don't know if we fully considered the exponential curve that is expressed through decentralization. And when you kind of combine these two worlds, what does that look like? What does that mean? Does the curve inflect more? It's very exciting. It's very exciting. And it's very important that as things might go into warp speed, that there is a decentralized way to make sure that there is the consent of parties, a consensus of parties saying, hey, yeah, this is probably a good direction for us to be headed into.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan, I'm looking forward to see how you guys make progress over the next few years. Bear family, give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed this content. If you have any thoughts or questions for Jonathan and myself, you're welcome to leave those down below. Also, again, be sure to follow them on the social media links if you're interested in following more closely. We do our best to try to focus again on these kind of early stage venture capital ideas. So again, recognize the risk of venture capital is all about asymmetry. Jonathan, I don't know if you've ever heard of this book, but it's one of my favorite books. It's called Dan Dow. It's all about high value, low risk investing. It says heads I win, tails I only lose a little. There's always this kind of interest of, the upside here could be asymmetric. So your terms of investment should always kind of base that I only lose a little, but if we're right here, the upside is enormous to getting this stuff correct. So I think I'm really interested to see where you guys take this. Again, I see that there's a big gap in between enterprise adoption, with people like Charles Hoskinson going out and trying to close deals, like specifically with the African government. Even though there's technology in place, a lot of it is still done at a person-to-person business level to make these integrations happen. Regardless of how good your tech is, it's still a lot about a personal database of people effectively. So it'll be cool to see where you guys go. Keep us updated. If there's anything you want to leave us out with today, we'll let you close out the show.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, man. I'm grateful for everyone who's watching to this point. We're really excited about the future we can build together. This is something that is technology at its heart, but it touches so many other areas of humanity. And we're excited to go on this journey and try to be a light as much as we can, because technology seems to be amoral. It doesn't have a preference either way, just like money. But it's the intent behind the technology or the money or whatever resource it is. We hope to provide a good intent as we build out further. So we thank you for watching to this point, and thank you, man, for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm glad you reached out. It's good to have Daniel be able to help kind of keep these conversations moving to some degree, because for the longest time I just shoved everything off the side. Like, I have no time for anything else right now. Like, it's not basically non-existent. And to your point there as well, one of my big lessons when I was younger, when I first met my mentor, was like, there's nothing wrong with capitalism. He's like, there's things wrong with people. And if you fix, the people that have the morality sitting behind the driver of the companies are often the ones that do the best, because this game is not won by total power and corruption. Often the world's best industries are led by competence and the ability to try to provide these better services faster and cheaper. And this does have downsides we're all always constantly working on and dealing with. But yes, I agree with you. I think that especially the companies moving forward are going to be the ones that are the best led by their moral drivers and heartbeats. So Jonathan, thank you for joining us on the show today. And hopefully we'll see you guys back again in the future to catch up on where you are as the product and development starts to go more user facing and live as well.
That sounds amazing. That sounds great.
Awesome. Bear family, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you guys again on the next episode.